Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, I'll be trying a new position on my SimWorx sequential shifter for my Heusinkveld handbrake. Of course, this will require me to once again go through the process of mock-up, fabrication, and installation of the handbrake in its new position. So, let's get to it. So we're going to be using this 1/4 inch plate that I have laying around. This is 6061 aluminum plate. And you can see it's got a hole drilled in it up here that I'm not sure what that was for, but just a scrap piece laying around. And the idea is to lay this across these two pieces of profile, and we'll drill some holes so we can get 2 bolts and 2 T-nuts to secure it to this profile here. Now, obviously we need to mock this up with this handbrake on it to figure out where we're going to be. And remember, this shifter has a lever here, this black lever. And as we move the shifter, that lever moves. Not sure how well that's going to show up because it's kind of not a very good contrast looking straight down on it. So we had to make sure we're clearing that, obviously. And then we'll bring the brake up here and set it up here. And I have this as straight as I possibly can get it as far as the arm on the brake itself. And I'm going to put it a little bit forward and off to the side so it doesn't interfere with the shifting. Now here it's actually going to interfere with the shifter because I can feel it hitting my hand. So it's rubbing against the back of my hand with this part of the handle. So what I'll do is I'll bring that back a little bit and then offset it again a little. And I'm trying to get the angle so when I'm doing the shifter, of course I'm not really sitting straight because I'm kind of twisted around here to do this shooting of the video, but when I'm sitting straight in the rig, my hand's going to be going up here and getting the shifter, and then it wants to come over here and get this handbrake and pull it sideways. Now I could do it like this, but obviously I don't have the room to shift and I can't get my hand around the shifter, so that's just not going to work. It's going to have to offset like that. And also I'm going to put it in a position so that I can get some bolts in here that this hollow part of the brake under here, so the bolts can go in and not interfere with the flanges here that we're going to use to mount, obviously, the handbrake to this plate. So we have to keep several things in mind while we're looking at this. Everything's a little compromised a lot of times, so we're not sure where we're going to end up, but I'm going to keep the edges flush with the profile and this plate here on the side here. I'm going to make sure this stays flush. There's a little bit overhanging here, which I'll cut off, but I'll cut that off from the rear because the rear has a kind of a crooked cut in it. It wasn't cut very straight, but everything else is straight around here, so we'll get rid of the crooked edge. And we might trim off do some radius cuts, obviously, here and there. We're not going to need the metal. Right, so now we have it in this position, and again, I'm looking with my line here, and it looks like I can get some bolts in there and still clear underneath the handbrake itself. I'm just going to kind of hold it with my left hand and shift, and then reach over and grab the brake. And that seems to be right about where where I would like it to be. Now I could turn it a little further so it even gives me more of a straight back pulling motion, but I also got to be mindful of the reach I have with my elbow here on the seat. I can only go back that far. So all these things I'm thinking about as and of course the handle's still loose because it bent back towards me. But all these things I'm thinking about as I'm mocking this up. And again, there's probably 20 different ways to do this, but this is the way I'm going to do it. And by drilling holes in the plate, and we'll see me doing that, I'm just going to drill the holes all the way through and then tap threads in it to hold the handbrake onto the plate itself, and put some very short screws into the actual flanges here so they don't protrude beneath the aluminum plate. That way I don't have to care where I'm putting this except for where I have to put my T-nuts and bolts for actually attaching the plate to the profile. So that looks about right to me. Looks like I can grab this pretty good, shift it. I'm clear of the brake handle. It actually could probably come in while my hand's sitting there. But again, it's all relative to where my holes are going to be for the plate here. So it's kind of a balancing act when you're doing this stuff, where you can be. And that gives me plenty of room to shift. Yeah, I'll never hit the brake handle doing that. And then I can come over here and get the brake handle and pull it almost back towards my body this way, which should be a pretty good angle. And I don't know if it's going to work any better than when I had it on the back here, pulling it this way. But again, you got a chance to try things, you might as well do it, right? So that looks about good to me. And So what I'll do is I want to make sure I can mark this. So I have a mechanical pencil here, and I just want to make a few marks. I think it'll sit there. It won't quite sit there. It wants to flip over this way because of the weight of the handbrake. But I'm looking straight down on it now, following my line, and it looks like, yeah, that's going to be pretty good. I might swivel it just a little bit over this way. All right, get everything lined up. And also, I want to make some marks on the profile itself. I think that should do. Again, I'm always going to check this to make sure that I'm clearing that handle when I'm doing my regular shifting, and that looks good there. I look good here, and it looks good. I can't really see the other end of that, but I'm just kind of following a straight line up here. That looks good too. So I'm going to mark this where I want the back of the plate to be on my profiles. Okay. Then I'm going, you won't be able to see this, I'm taking my pencil and marking where the profile is in relation to the bottom of this plate, so I know how much, as far as lengthwise, I can get away with cutting off. And I have, obviously I'm a little restricted what I can do here because I can't cut any further than this. And up here you can't see it, but the same deal's going on with the flange up there. So I can trim some of it off, but there's still going to be some overhang, it looks like. That's fine. So yeah, now all I got to do is I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick outline around the flanges itself on the plate. And this will give me an idea where to come back to. Once I have my plate cut down and drilled, I'll do that on the other side. Just draw a little line around the flange. No big deal here. And if you want to, you can actually go in and draw the inner parts too. Because remember, we will be drilling a hole in this plate eventually. So we can go ahead and mark the position of these slots very carefully. Don't move anything. And that'll give us exactly where we need to put our screws. I think I got all done. Yeah. So when we take that off, we should see a little impression, and we do. Set that aside. Yep, that'll do it. And again, once I have the brake mounted to this, in final mock-up, I might go back and trim just a little bit off. It all depends. I'm certainly going to trim down to this because I'm getting rid of this hole here, so I got plenty of room to do that because the flange is here and this hole's way up here on the edge. So we can get rid of the hole and it'll look a lot better. Right. So that's all we're doing as far as the mock-up now, and what we're going to do now is go over to the bandsaw and we're going to cut some off of this, and we're also going to go ahead and come back after I do that. I'm going to set this down one more time, come back to my marks here. I'm going to try to go ahead and cut this uneven edge off, and we'll come back to where my marks are on the profile, set it back down, and then I'm going to make my final marks for the holes where the bolts are going to go for the T-nuts to attach to the profile itself. So let's go do some cutting. So here we are on my El Cheapo Grizzly benchtop bandsaw, and yeah, we're just going to freehand cut this piece of metal. It's not going to give me the straightest line possible, but it's good enough because I'll be cleaning up the edges on it later on, and we're not trying to fit this into a perfectly square space. Just trying to get some of the roughness off of the actual plate itself, and of course excess plate that we don't need. Right, and the whole trick to this is just very slowly feeding. I'm not even pushing, I'm just kind of guiding the metal plate into the blade and let the blade do all the work. It's not the fastest way to cut something, but it is a very easy way to maintain very tight control as the blade is cutting along the line. Bandsaws, if you guys ever use one, know they tend to wander on you as far as the blade cutting anything, and which is a good thing if you're trying to cut a circle or you're trying to cut a radius corner or something like that, but not so great if you're trying to cut a straight line. But it's doable, and you just have to be patient with it. And like you see how slowly I'm feeding this line through here, so just be patient, and yeah, you can get it done. So yeah, now that we get it cut, we'll go ahead and go back over to the rig and see what it looks like. Now that I've cut the excess off this plate, I'm going to mark the holes as far as where these channels are lining up on this plate. So I'm taking this part of the plate here, and I'm going to line it up with the outside edge so it's nice and flush of the profile piece here. I'm going to go ahead and butt it up against this because really it doesn't matter where I am when I'm doing this as long as I'm straight this way and I'm even with the other side. So I'm just going to kind of put my finger back there and feel it when it, yeah, that's nice and flush between these two pieces of metal. You can't feel a gap. So that feels pretty good right there. So I'm just going to hold it, and you need to get on top of it and look straight down. At least that's what I do, so that I can see the center of this channel pretty clearly. And go ahead and just make a mark where the center of that channel is. I'm also going to make a mark up here. I've got a little bit of the channel. You may not be, you can't see it in the video, but I have about 1/4 inch or 7 mils or so of channel exposed, so I can actually look down there too and make a mark in the middle of there. The reason I'm doing both sides is because I can't be sure how square these cuts are that I made, and I want to make sure that if I if I mark 2 marks on each side and draw a straight line between them, I know I'm going to be straight as far as the length of this profile. And getting those T-nuts lined up with the holes is very important to get it straight. Right, so there's one. And I got to kind of hold it down on the other side now and do the same thing over here. Look straight down, make my mark. That looks pretty good. Then we'll come in and do the back one. That looks pretty good. Yes. Right. So now all I have to do is draw a line between these 2 marks, nice and straight, and that should give me a straight line to go on to where I want to mark my holes to drill for the T-nuts that are going to be holding this plate down. So yeah, we'll get on with that. Now we can actually mark where we want our holes to be. Now remember, even though I drew the flange where the handbrake is going to sit, I outlined the flange, you can see there, I still have some wiggle room with this a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and guesstimate that I need a hole here and about right here to clear the flange in that position. Now if I don't get it perfectly right, it's okay, because I can actually move this around just a little bit. I got some wiggle room, in other words, to move this around a little bit to clear those bolts when they're sticking on top of this plate. Over here, no worries. It's just straightforward. What I'm going to do is take the same square I did to mark the holes, and you can actually move this thing around. You just loosen it's got this little screw there, and if I loosen that, I can actually move this thing back and forth like that. So what I'm going to do is go over here where it says 1 inch, just kind of slide it up with my thumb until I hit the 1 inch mark. Don't have to be perfect, and then I'll tighten that back down. Right? So that gives me an inch reveal, as they say. And all I got to do is take this, there's my line right there, set this up against it, take my pencil again, and make a cross across that line. And then I'll come over to the other side and do the same thing. It's a good way to mark accurate holes every time. And again, over here, I'm going to use this as a guide for the X's that I want, but I'm kind of guesstimating here. I'm pretty clear here, so I'm going to make one right about there, I think. So I'll just kind of line that up and use it as a straight edge just to get my cross. There's a nice cross mark there. And this one's the trickier of the two, and I think I'm going to keep that back a little bit further back than those 1 inch marks. That looks about right. And we'll cross that one there. Right. So there's our hole. There's where our holes are going to be. Now we're going to start drilling them, but before you drill them, you want to mark the hole. And this is a spring-loaded unit here that once you press down on something and it pops, it leaves a mark. And I'll show you what that does. And of course, we can adjust the tension of the spring and things like this with this handle. But anyway, you get down on top. You got to look straight down on top and kind of. I don't know how well this is going to show up in the video, but I'm kind of using 2 hands here to get this thing centered, and then I kind of roll it on top once I start where I need to be, and that looks pretty good right there. And we'll go ahead and push down on it, and it'll make a pop noise. And there's our mark. I don't know how well that's going to show up. There it is. So if it's not perfectly on the line, I still have some wiggle room here on the mark, because I'm going to do this several times once I have the hole in there. And if I'm just a little off one way or the other, when I make the second one, I can kind of aim it over to the side a little bit, like this one. This one looks to be dead on, but I'm just still going to give it a little bit of an angle on it, just to see if I can get it to move a little bit onto solid. Yeah, there we go. Ah, that's good. So that is definitely, I don't know how, like I said, I don't know how well the video is showing this, but that's dead on the lines right there. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and do it a couple more times, straight this time. Every time you do it, it opens up a little bit, and that's about good enough, because I want it open enough to where that drill bit, when I put it on there, has a nice deep groove there, or divot, if you will, so that it tracks nice and straight when it goes in there. Right, so all we got to do is do the rest of them. So we'll do that and speed it up. Okay, so now we've got all 4 holes marked, and we're ready to go over and clamp this down and drill our holes. So we'll do that next. So here we are drilling the small pilot hole, and you can see the bigger hole next to it already. And I like to drill a pilot hole because obviously it just lets the big bit right here track through the hole a little bit cleaner. Right, so once we get these holes drilled, we'll take the plate back over and fit it to the 80/20 and see what that looks like. We now have the plate mounted to our profiles, as you can see here. All the holes lined up really nicely, so that worked out fine. And we're going to go ahead and put the handbrake up here. And remember, I had the markings done with pencil where it was positioned before as a general guideline of where we wanted to be. And I have to say, now remember, there's an issue of clearing the hole we have, or the space we have in between these flanges, right? So yeah, that was kind of a gamble putting them there. I was kind of doing it by line of sight and guesstimating and that kind of stuff. But most of the time, if you mock it up like we did before, that's why we do these mock-ups, is you get really close if you don't get on it. And that's what we have here. I can actually, there is a piece here on the bottom of the load cell where it mounts to the frame here. Okay, there's the frame part and there's the load cell. So it mounts to this plate. This is the plate right here that's bumping into this button head screw here. Not a big deal, because if I look at the pattern I had before and I've slided up and bump into that screw like that, I'm still great as far as the angle that I wanted. Let me twist back around here. Let's drop that cable. And my angle is still good. I can still reach up here. It's exactly the same as far as the angle I had before. Now, I am 3 millimeters back from where I originally drew these lines. I measured it was 3 millimeters. And if I'm only off 3 millimeters, yeah, that's not going to be something I'm noticing. The main thing is I'm still, if I'm driving and I'm shifting in anger, I'm going over and grabbing that shifter. I don't want to be hitting this brake handle, and that's exactly what's going on. I got plenty of clearance right now. Yeah, this is going to work really well. So all I have to do is just slide this forward until I bump it in to the head of that screw. It's like that. Everything else is lined up perfectly. It's just a forward-backward adjustment, right? And then all I've got to do is mark, again, the back parts of the flanges here. I'm going to leave all the other markings where they are. Just get it lined up nice. And just mark the back of the flanges where they need to be. And yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. And then we'll go drill our holes. And remember, this time I'm going to tap the threads in the holes I drill in this plate, so that I can just put the screw directly into it and it won't interfere with anything as I put the screws in, because chances are the screws could interfere with the profile if I had to put a nut on the bottom of it or flip the screw around. Even the head of the screw might interfere with the profile somewhere. So best just to go ahead and drill a hole, tap the threads in it, and you're done. You don't have to worry about it. So, right, when we come back, we'll have the holes drilled, and yeah, I might even show you me drilling those holes and tapping the threads in them before we actually get back to where we show it mounted. So now we have it mounted up. I think this is going to be the final position because it feels pretty good. Now, we did obviously go mark our holes just like we marked our holes for the plate. We marked them for the flange here, or the mounting plate part of this handbrake. And we obviously drill the holes, and then of course I actually tap threads, and here's a shot of me actually tapping the threads here. And that yellow stuff you see is some lubrication that helps the cutter go through the metal easier on your blades too. And once we had all that done, you can see all the holes are where they're supposed to be, and now everything is tight, and yeah, it's working fine. Nice, nice. I really like that. In fact, the angle pull on it is pretty relaxing as far as pulling it back towards your body instead of having it like right here. I don't know, you know, it's hard to say, even though I really couldn't get it here because of the seat and my legs in the way. But yeah, it doesn't interfere with the shifter at all. I don't have this totally mounted solid yet, so I got plenty of room for the shifter. and then reach over, grab for the handbrake. Naturally, don't have to take my eyes off the road. Yeah, plenty of clearance down here at the lever. So this is actually turning out pretty good. Now I'm also going to, as you can see, there's a lot of excess aluminum plate hanging out here. So I'm going to take my pencil and kind of go around the edge here and use that as a template. Probably going to cut along the edge here, but I'm not sure. I might leave some metal sticking out just a little bit, and then just cut the radiuses off like something like this or this. I don't know. I'm going to use a compass to draw it to figure it out, but all this is going away for sure. I'm going to cut a lot of this off. This is a big chunk. It doesn't need to be here. And right here on the front, we've got plate hanging over the profile, so it's extending past the profile. And what I'm going to do is, you can see it's got a sharp edge right here. Obviously, we don't want it cutting the seat when the seat is moving back and forth for different people getting in and out. So I'm going to take the pencil and just do a rough little draw here of a radius to cut off of that, because we don't need that there. And yeah, cut all that off, and then yeah, we'll be good to go. So other than that, there won't be any more cutting. So we're just going to the bandsaw and cut the rest of that off. Then, of course, we're going to clean the plate up. We're going to put it on the sander. I'll show you me doing that in case you guys are interested in, cleaning up your work when you're done. Actually, you don't have to do anything. If you wanted to, you could just run it just like this, except for I would still cut this off at least to keep it from gouging your seat, because that'd be a tragedy on a $700 seat to rip the fabric. Yeah, that wouldn't be good. But yeah, I'm pretty happy the way this feels right now. Yeah. And I'm not sure if I'm going to like it any better than having it down here, but I do like that I don't have to foam on it. All right, so what we'll do next is get the plate cleaned up, come back, and yeah, I'll do some driving. So here we are at the belt sander. Now this is a little cheapy Harbor Freight belt sander. It was like $40 or something, and it came with belts too. And I'm using about a 200 grit here, 220, something like that. And I've already taken the plate and cut all the excess metal off that I wanted to, and I talked about previously. I even took off all the metal that was right next to the flange on the outside of the plate that's pointing to the outside of the rig. And we'll see that once I have it mounted back up. So here I'm just going to give a basic cleanup of the edges here, because this bandsaw actually doesn't leave a real fine finish, as you might imagine, a toothed blade cutting through the aluminum. And we're rounding off the corners, and I'm also going to cut a little chamfer here along the edges just to knock the sharp edge off of that. But we will finish cleaning this up with a bastard file, as they call them, and do it by hand a little bit, and I'll show you how I do that. And yeah, we're also going to try to clean up the face of this plate a bit, just enough to knock all the garbage off of it. There was some pitting and some other nastiness on this plate, as you guys may have noticed when I was showing it to you before. So after this, we'll go over to the bench and put this in the vise, and yeah, use the file on it. So here is the plate after we finished with the belt sander, and we've cleaned it up pretty good here. Even though we were using a 220 grit, it actually is not too bad of a finish on there, but you can see from those edges it's still pretty rough. It has a grain to it, and yeah, we want to go ahead and clean that up even more. And I thought I'd show you this before I get it over to the vise, and I'm actually using the bastard file to clean all this up a bit. So what we'll do next is go ahead and stick her in the vise and see how that goes. Now we have the plate in the vise, and we have our bastard file out here, and we're just polishing this up with the bastard file. It really leaves a pretty good finish, actually. And we're just rounding off the corners and the radiuses here that we cut into the aluminum plate. And of course, we're also going to be working on the long flat right there. You can see me working the long flats here. And yeah, you have to kind of roll this file over. Once you do this a few times, you kind of get the hang of it. And we're also going to dress up those chamfers on the sides that we put in with the belt sander, because they're a little bit rough, really, at the end. When you finally pull it off, it just looks a little rough. Right. So as we continue to work on this, once we're finished with all the edges, we'll put it on the bench, and then we'll sand the face down a bit, maybe put a little polish on it, and see what we end up with. So here we have the finished plate. And yeah, if you remember what the original plate looked like, and here's a quick shot of it here. Yeah, this looks so much better, I think. And I've got it polished out to where I can see my hand in it pretty good. And didn't want to get it, you can see the camera's viewer there. And I didn't want to get it mirror finish because mirror finish just, it scratches too easy and gets messed up too easy. And anyway, just wanted to clean this up. And you can see all the radiuses are now cut. The plate will sit like this, with the front being here, the back being there, and of course the handbrake holes are here. These tapped holes right here, 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 here. And yeah, so we have the radius here so that it won't cut the seat. And I went ahead and just rounded off the edges. If you saw when I was actually sanding it on the sander, and then we just took some sandpaper and slowly worked up from grits from 220 all the way up to a 600, and then just polished it a little bit with some aluminum polish. Edges are looking good, nice and clean, and that's from using that file, and of course using the sandpapers too, and then polishing them out a little bit. Didn't take too much work, but yeah, this is something that I just wanted to do to clean things up. We can't be putting this plate next to that beautiful SimWorx polished CNC aluminum bits without, at least trying to make it look a little better, right? All right, so now all left to do is go ahead over to the rig, get this mounted up, and see how it looks, and then we'll take it for a drive and see how everything works. Now we have the shiny plate finally mounted in its resting position, and we've got actually some decent reflection going on there. Again, not too shiny because it's just going to get fingerprints all over it and not look that great really quick. And yeah, so we'll just go around here and check it out as far as how we did the mounting on the side. You can see how much metal was trimmed away, like I said I was going to do. And we put some radiuses all the way across the front there. And again, the corner next to the seat is trimmed out, so we have no fear of the seat material getting ripped. Yeah, so this is working out pretty good. And we'll take another look at it from this angle. Alright, now this is actually the angle here, the offset angle. You can see a picture of it here. Came out to 16 degrees. So that's a 16-degree offset from the parallel, or the line that the actual shifter lever is in. So we're going to get in and start driving and see how that works. So here we are in iRacing in the Ford Fiesta, and I can say right away that this is a more comfortable position for the handbrake to be in for me personally. Of course, all that is subjective, and everybody has their own preference. The horizontal position, using the brake there, I'm really not doing any better track times than with it in the vertical position, but it does seem a little bit more natural to me, or more, I don't know, familiar. Once the muscle memory set in, and I actually had to get used to not pulling up on the horizontal brake and using the vertical, obviously, but once the muscle memory kicked in, everything was fine. But we're using a whole different muscle group, not a whole different, we're using some of the existing muscles we did before, pulling straight up on the horizontal lever, but now we're pulling it to us. So we're using more of the pec muscles in the chest and the trapezoid muscles in the back as we're pulling it. So it actually is, in a long stint, seems to be a little bit more comfortable to me personally. But again, the performance is really no difference. So it's really just a preference thing when it comes to this. And yeah, I'm glad I went to the trouble to do this. And I think, going through the fabrication process, I'll do these things anyway, so that was no big deal. But I have to say I'm pretty happy, I think, with this, and I think it's going to stay that way. And being off angle like it is at the 16 degrees is just about perfect. I think everything really came together here. And again, due to the process I use to mock up and then start the fabrication process. And of course, we check our work often as we go along. Right, so what we'll do is, just get over to I'll let this run a little bit, and then we'll get over to the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the changing of my handbrake's location. I don't know about you, but it seems that I'm always thinking of different ways to tweak my cockpit setup to improve comfort, stiffness, and its overall performance. Oftentimes you have to have something mounted to your cockpit to determine if there may be a better way to employ it. While using the handbrake in the horizontal position did not create any detrimental effects to my comfort or performance, I just couldn't help thinking that, well, I wanted to try the handbrake in a vertical orientation. But as seen in the previous video I made concerning the combining of the SimWorx sequential shifter and the Heusinkveld handbrake, that position was not possible if I wanted to keep the handbrake in the same plane as the shifter's handle. The only way to get the HE unit mounted in the vertical position was to cant the handbrake at the angle to the shifter lever. As you saw in the video, it was not very difficult to get this done with a few tools that many people already have in their garages or their workshops. I was able to show how I drill the holes, tap threads, cut the aluminum plate to size, and add several radius corners to it. Then use an inexpensive belt sander, metal file, and sandpaper to bring my rather rough-looking piece of scrap aluminum stock that I had laying around the SRG to a finish level that I wouldn't mind looking at every day. While driving with the handbrake in its new position, I immediately liked what I was feeling. Once my muscle memory adapted to the new position, it was actually easier to employ it. This, I think, due to the different muscle group I was using during its operation. So, the verdict is in, and I'll be leaving the handbrake in its new position. Unless... I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.